a previous video I talked about an offset spatula, and here is an example of a small one of those. As you can see, there's a slight bend and then a straight part there, and that's really good when you're going around on a cake and trying to smooth the top and any edges. You can get them in different sizes, and again, lots of practice makes perfect. Now today, I actually thought I'd take the opportunity to go over fondant with you. You can use a silicone mat. I haven't managed to find one big enough for me, so I actually just thoroughly clean and dry my worktop and I do it straight onto there. But a silicone mat is absolutely amazing, especially if you get one with measurements on, which I think pretty much all of them do come with, because they help you measure out, say for example an 8-inch cake, that kind of thing. But a worktop will suffice, and I'll show you how. I'm not sure if you've ever seen one of these before, but this is a cake dummy or a dummy cake. I actually have 3 tiers of this, so for practicing, it's pretty handy, as you can see. The problem with this is, as you can also see, it's polystyrene. I think you can get some different materials, but you do get little nicks in it. So if you are going to create something that you want to be accurate, then you would need to fill those little nicks with buttercream and do the usual process to make it as smooth as possible. I'm not going to do that today. I'm just going to show you how to place fondant over a cake. It won't be completely perfect because I'm not going to fill these little holes in, I suppose, and dents. Okay, but it's just to give you the general principle. Now, generally, there's a lot of conflict in the baking world about how to do this correctly and whether you should use icing sugar or corn flour on your work surface. I actually find corn flour doesn't change the texture of the fondant. Icing sugar can actually make it go more like an elephant skin and crisp up more, whereas the corn flour is better for that. It doesn't actually seem to compromise the integrity of the fondant. However, today I actually don't have any corn flour, so I'm using some icing sugar in a little shaker here, and I'm going to place that over my worktop. This is so we can start working the actual fondant. Now, I've actually bought pre-packaged fondant, which isn't my favourite thing. I have found a recipe to make it yourself, but I've not tried that yet. When I do, I'll share it with you. So what I'm going to do now is stop. You are going to get a few stops and starts and abrupt endings in this video because I'm going to piece it all together. So I apologise in advance for that. But I'm going to go and work the fondant. It's a little bit like Play-Doh. You need to warm it up so that it's in the right condition to use. The fondant comes out in a bit of a block, and your job is to warm it up in your hands or to put it against your worktop. I didn't really explain it earlier, but this is so it doesn't stick to your worktop, because as you're working it, that is what will happen. Now, one thing I don't like about fondant is just how much of it you have to actually use to cover a cake, and it's not the cheapest material. So we're going to bring our cake over here, and what we're going to do with this string is go from this side over the top quite loosely, so that we can get an idea of how much fondant we actually need. Okay, so I'm going to cut this here. And that just means I'm going to put this on the counter, and when I am rolling out my fondant, I will know what kind of size I need it to be. Okay, this is the fun part. I need to try and make this circle that I'm about to create to go over my cake, or dummy cake, as accurate as possible, if possible even larger. Remember, you often need more than you realise. I've actually used a whole pack for this, and this is a 6-inch tier, which would probably equate to about 2 layers of cake, or 3 very, very thin ones. So I've actually buttercreamed this onto the base so that when I come to put the fondant on top, it won't move. Okay, so now we're going to try very gently to roll this out to be as large as or larger than the string. It just gives you more room to work, and also try and keep this the width or depth of a pound coin. I don't use fondant a lot, as I said, and the problem when you don't do something all the time is you do get a bit out of practice. So okay, bit boring for you, so I'll probably get rid of some of this. Some people can do this really quickly. I like to take my time. But what you're aiming for is to get the right size and the right depth. You don't want it too thin because it will tear, and you don't want it too thick. Wow. It is shocking how much fondant you have to actually use to cover a cake. As you can see, the icing sugar is doing a really good job. You want it as consistent as possible, which is much easier said than done. Okay, I'm happy with that, I hope. What we're going to do is, lots of people do it different ways. Some people use spatulas and lift it onto the cake. Some people use their hands. Some people are just pros and, you know, just chuck it on there. I'm actually going to do a technique that a lot of people use, which is to lift it with my rolling pin. I'm rolling it back there. It looks like some of that started sticking, so just really do make sure you've put enough powdered sugar on here. I'm also going to add a little bit of buttercream to the worktop now, and this is so that the actual cake base will stick when I'm buttercreaming, sorry, not buttercreaming, when I am putting the fondant onto my cake. Okay, so nice and gently. I've definitely made it large enough this time. Yes, brilliant. Okay, I need to just move that over a touch. The goal here is to try not to tear the fondant. Okay, just smooth it around. If you've made it large enough, you shouldn't end up with lots of creases. If it's not long enough, you'll end up with all these folds, and they are so difficult to iron out. But at this stage, you can now just go around with your hand and smooth it. Brilliant. Do you know what? I know it sounds really silly, but I actually love this effect. You know when you've got the extra fondant at the bottom? I love it. It reminds me of a hat or a dress. Like, you know, I think you could actually make this into, if you were to stack it up, you could make it into some kind of wedding dress or something. But that's just me. Now, normally, I would use a smoother, but my smoother, since we've had our kitchen done, has disappeared. So I'm just going to use my hands today. Now, some people use water to go and smooth out some of these little tears because it will dry. If you have any powder left on there again, you can use water to get that off because it will dry and go back to normal. I'm not going to do anything much with this one because it's already drying out where I've used the powdered sugar. So if you have cornstarch or some kind of shortening, I would absolutely recommend using that. I'm not 100% if I'm going to keep this on here or use it for another tutorial actually. But yeah, what you can start doing, because it is a bit like Play-Doh, is just tidying up all the bits you're not happy with. And again, I just find your hands are one of the best tools when you are cake decorating. And that's for fondant, that's for buttercream. Okay, I'm just going to spin this round so you can see it is actually consistent all the way around there. Just fantastic. So, how do we cut this off? Well, you need a very sharp knife. If you're lucky, you might actually have one of the proper cutting tools, which again I would like to have, but I haven't got there yet. But try not to cut it completely under the cake. Try and go a little bit more. And most people will put a ribbon or some kind of rolled up balls around the bottom, so you don't have to obsess over this. Obviously, if you are going to be keeping this on the cake, then yeah, you need to be very careful. But again, so I'm going to do it around there. I tried a pizza cutter the other day, just out of interest, to see what would happen. And it didn't give me the result I was after. So I'm just going to go slightly outside of the edge with my knife. I don't love the taste of fondant, but I have to say, I really enjoy playing with it. I remember saying to my sister-in-law, oh, just to have the patience. But then we both realised that actually it wasn't about patience, it's about having the time. Just be really careful. And I think the problem is when you have small children, it's just having the time. They're actually both at school today, preschool and school, so I thought this was my golden opportunity. And then again, just tidy up the bottom area there. So I could have left a bit more here, but you can actually just really slowly and delicately work this down. Tidy up some of these edges here, but again, just use your hands. In fact, you could also use, which I happen to have, some kind of, excuse me, wax paper or baking paper, and you just put it over, use the warmth of your hands. And the reason it's good to use this is because I've actually got powder on my hands now, so as you're rubbing against it, it doesn't give the same effect. Whereas this smooths it out really nicely. So I don't know if you can see a few of these little bits here. As soon as you apply a smoother or something nice and flat and smooth and the warmth of your hands, it just looks really flawless and beautiful. But a cake smoother is just as effective. Wow. And I've seen loads on the market actually. I've got to try a few more of them. So you can't say that fondant doesn't look professional, and I think that is why so many people love using it. So when I say I don't like it, I'm really not criticising. Please don't think I'm being unkind or rude. I absolutely understand the appeal of it. I love it. I think it looks amazing. I just do not like the taste of it. And I think this just proves you don't need high-tech tools either, do you, really? Okay, so I'm going to show you a little bit here as well. So here it's just gone a little bit dry, look like it could tear, and it kind of just like blends it all together. My son has asked for a Batman and Robin cake for his birthday, and the frustration for me is that I'm going to make it, but I can't share it on my page. What I might have to do is show you it before anything goes on it. Now, I'm sure somebody emailed me asking me how can you stop the tearing. My tips are, make sure you've used enough fondant. Okay, just do not skimp on it. Make sure you've used enough. And then just go through and just use a smoother or this technique really. I don't know if you can actually see the result that I'm getting with this, but it is amazing. I will as always share links to any products I use, and if you could buy them through me, then I'll just get a very small commission and I'll be just so grateful. Thank you very much. But this is addictive. And again, you can tidy up the bottom more so that it's completely sharp. Some people actually tuck it underneath their tier, but as I've stuck it down, I don't really want to dislodge it. And then some people put little decorations around, which I'll show you in a minute actually. This actually is a good way of working the dough down rather than using your fingers. Dough. I keep saying dough, I'm so sorry. Fondant. I'm hoping you're starting to understand why you really do need to have very smooth buttercream underneath, because fondant exposes every little bump. But the way you can actually disguise it is if you do have a bump that you can't disguise, then you can just make things fondant accessories to put on there. Again, I know that's what a lot of people do. And I think at the end of the day, as long as it looks good and it tastes good, I don't think it really matters. What you do have to be careful of is what you do with the other hand. I nearly took a piece off then. That would have been very disappointing. Wow, that just looks divine. Good enough to eat, and it's a dummy in fondant, so there you go. I've actually got a tiny bit around here, I've just noticed, a tiny little tear there. And again, if you keep working on it very gently, you can actually disguise it. You can mend it essentially, because you're very gently warming up and bonding the fondant. I know some people will get another piece of fondant and stick it in there. I haven't found that works for me, but always have a try. It's always worth a try. I think the problem here is there's a dent in the actual cake dummy, so that's why you would need buttercream to fill that dent. I think you'll agree that's a really good effect there. So I'm just going to go around, I'm going to rip it into two now and use both. So, if you weren't sure what to do, now hopefully you are. Okay. I'm going to do fine around with my hands. Just push the bottoms down, make sure they're nice and secure. Okay. Okay, for this next part, I've got gloves on. And that is because I'm going to be using food colouring. Now, I've often got baker's hands because I'm constantly using food colouring. My favourite thing in the world is actually colouring buttercream. So again, I think this is why I am a buttercream fan. Maybe it's not just the flavour, I think it's the texture, it's the things you can do with it, and I love vanilla buttercream because, you know, essentially you can just do all sorts of different designs and colours with it. I'm actually going to be using a Sugar Flare Baby Pink colour, and I'm going to change this white fondant into pink fondant. Now, if you put a tiny bit in and just swirl it, you can actually make a two-tone effect, but I want it to actually be completely pink. So, just make a little dip in your fondant. You only need a little bit when you're colouring anything, really. So I tend to use cocktail sticks, or you've probably seen in previous videos that I've kept all my children's baby spoons. So they're little plastic spoons, and they're just amazing for mixing buttercream and putting colours into things. So I tend to use them when I'm colouring things. Okay. And then what we're going to do is start just folding this. I've seen so many effects people use with colouring fondant. It's amazing. I'm just going to move some of this out of the way a moment. Start kneading it on here. Again, I won't make you watch the whole process because it's a little bit boring for you, isn't it? I think I'm going to need a tiny bit more in there actually, because that's quite a big ball of fondant. Okay. It's definitely easier to colour buttercream. You just literally pour it in and mix it. These gel colours are the best because the gel colours you don't have to use as much for, and they have a more vibrant appearance. I have some really good tips actually for colouring buttercream, but I'll show you that in another video. I'm sorry I waffle so much. This is part of who I am, so I apologise, but you will get used to it hopefully. Okay, you're starting to see it's just smearing through. Okay, so I'm just going to keep working that, and I'll probably show you the next part of the video when it's fully done, because this is quite boring to watch, isn't it? I think this is going to be a nice pale pink actually. Oh, that's just lovely. And again, if you wanted to have that kind of effect, you can actually leave it. But I kind of want the whole thing to be pink, so. But it is cool. You get like a marble effect. It's awesome. I think this is why people love fondant. There are just so many things you can do with it. And then it gives you this professional, polished look that I just don't think you can get with the buttercream to the same degree. I'm talking myself into using fondant more, and this isn't good. It's just so much more effort. They're getting loads of orders for fondant cakes now. But I just hope from these videos that you think, right, I can have a go at that, I can master this, I can do this. Or at least some people to appreciate what does go into the cakes that are made for you, because I myself have had people say that they'll taste my cakes for free, or can they have freebies, and you know, it's, first of all, the ingredients and equipment cost a lot anyway. But you know, at the end of the day, this is a business, and I'm not doing it just for fun, although that's a big part of it. I need to fund that equipment and fund those ingredients. There's still more that I would like to buy, and also support my family. So, you know, as much as I'd love to give everything away, I just can't. Okay, there you can see, beautiful shade of pink. Isn't that lovely? And I don't have baker's hands because it's not all over my hands either, so. Oh my word, I love pink. I just love pink. That just makes me happy. Like pink Play-Doh. Okay, so I've got to decide what we're doing with this. Shall we make a nice little border to go around the cake? Maybe some little balls, or make some shapes, or make a figure? Or shall I cover the other tier of cake in this one? It's tempting. That would look really nice. Let's do that. I hope I've got enough there. Oh, that is just a beautiful shade of pink. I'm really happy with that. I think you can tell. I just thought I'd show you quickly how, again, you can not just disguise, but cover those edges at the bottom. You can use a ribbon. I've actually not got big enough ribbon here, so at the back it's pretty open at the moment. But if you do want to stick the ribbon on, some people put cocktail sticks or some kind of pin through. I'm not a big fan of putting non-edibles inside the cake, and if you do, I do think you need to tell your customer just so they're aware. Obviously, if you're doing tiered cakes, you have to put dowlings in and that kind of thing. I'll cover that in another video too. But essentially, you get a little brush, and I have some little Wilton paint brushes, which I'll show you, and then you just apply it to this. And some people just use water actually. You don't even need to use edible glue, but I'm using edible glue. And then you just paint it where it needs to go. Hold it on, and it sticks it in place. And you might want to do that over multiple places, positions, so that it really does stick to the cake nicely. Some people use buttercream, which is also a really good idea. The reason I'm not using buttercream on this is because it actually has gaps in and the buttercream will come through. So that's not something I would advise you do, but I mean, that just looks beautiful, doesn't it? And then once you've put your little details on, or maybe put another tier on, it would just look gorgeous. Another thing with these cake dummies is obviously I haven't put buttercream on them or anything for the fondant to stick to. So you really do need to do that. You can actually use all sorts of things. Some people use jam, some people use apricot jam, some people use marmalade, some people just use buttercream, some people use ganache. It's completely a personal choice. Okay, I couldn't talk that time, I had to concentrate. I'm gonna just cut around here, all the way around. I'm really happy with that one, but I just want to smooth it out a bit more once I've taken away this little skirt here. Beautiful, yay! And I've still got some to make little things out of. I want to make hearts, but I can't find my heart cutters. So, in true style of not being able to find anything at the moment, I cannot wait for the kitchen to be finished and for us to be able to put everything away properly and, you know, that kind of thing. It'll be amazing. It really will be. Okay. It's a bit of an air bubble there, so just, again. Right. I'm going to use my little smoothers, my unofficial smoothers, which I should probably use a new one because these have now started to get a bit powdery themselves. But just the warmth. Don't overdo it. Just get that little. Obviously a smoother is probably better, but as I've said several times now, if you're not feeling at home, you can't bake because you don't have all the professional equipment. I literally started with nothing. I started with a mixing bowl and a wooden spoon. That was how I began baking. And then when I realised I loved it, people started buying me things as presents. And then my husband, every time he went to the supermarket, would come back with another supply and he'd put it in with our weekly shopping budget, that kind of thing. So, and there is still so much that I would like that at the moment I cannot justify paying out for. So, okay, beautiful. So, I'll be putting this on top of the other tier. And here is the result of our fondant tutorial. Obviously you could go around and make it a little bit smoother, but as a little example on some cake dummies, I don't think that's a bad effort. And you can definitely recreate this at home. Now you could, if you didn't want to use ribbon, and some people don't like using ribbon because they don't like it against the cake. If that is the case, you can actually line it with some wax paper behind so that it's not making contact with the actual food. But most people don't actually worry, and I always try and go food safe where possible. But anyway, as you saw what I was doing there, you can actually roll little balls and use those to decorate the bottom, like so, just all the way around, or you could use your piping bag and you could go around and do that. So lots of different ways to finish your cake, but I'm just a bit of a fan of ribbon. I just think it looks really pretty, and also you can decorate your cake boards by putting fondant on them and you let them go hard. I think some people bake them, but I've never tried that, but I will on a future tutorial. And some people actually place ribbon around the cake board, especially when it's a thicker one, obviously. So again, lots of things we can explore to give it that polished and professional look. I just tidied up the fondant a tiny bit on the top tier and just wanted to show you what other kinds of things you can do to dress up your cakes. So you could put fresh flowers on, again you can make designs to place on them, or you can actually put accessories on, and that's one of my favourites. And if I had enough buttercream, which sadly I don't, I was actually going to do a bottom tier, and that was going to be completely covered in rosettes, which would make this really quite a beautiful cake. So all sorts of things you can do with it. Design possibilities are endless. So here is the result of the Dr. Oetker gel, and you have a nice shade of pink. It's a different shade of pink to the one I have on the fondant, which is a true baby pink, but I'm still going to use it. It won't completely match the design, which will frustrate me, but just for demonstrating to you what we can do with it, I thought it was good enough. Now this really messy cake tier here is, normally you would obviously crumb coat your cake, you would have a layer of buttercream. The only reason I've just chucked some loose in here is because as I'm about to put some rosettes or some decorations onto this cake, onto the cake dummy, sorry, it actually will not stick very well if there isn't something on there, which you also find with the traditional cake. On another video of mine, I think I did say that if your cake has dried out or it's been refrigerated or frozen, then trying to get any designs to stick to it is quite difficult. In another of my videos, I also told you that you can have different ratios of buttercream. So the amount of icing sugar to butter will make a huge difference in the consistency of your buttercream and how it should be used. This is actually something I would usually use for a crumb coat or for filling layers rather than for buttercream rosettes. But the reason I'm using it is because it was already made and I just don't want to have to waste ingredients. So this might not come out as it normally would, but for the sake of this. Now obviously normally you would have this on a cake stand and you wouldn't be able to just lift it like this unless it was frozen, which you still wouldn't really do. I have seen that there's a tilting cake stand that I want badly, but I haven't managed to get one yet. But I'm just going to show you with one hand, this is going to be rough, how you can do rosettes on a cake. You can do small ones or larger ones, and essentially this is a really big trend at the moment as well, is having a cake tier with rosettes on, and it's actually my favourite thing. In fact, one of the names that I did want to call myself before Jazzy Home Bakes was to do with rosettes, but it was already taken because I am addicted to rosettes, especially on my cupcakes. I can actually do loads of designs which I will be showcasing shortly on my page and on my website. But rosettes are always I come back to them. I just think they just look so effective and pretty, and admittedly a bit girly. Right, this is really tricky from this angle, so please forgive me. But essentially the look we're going for is lots and lots of rosettes, and you can actually use different colours. I've seen people do graduations where they have a darker pink on the bottom and then it goes to a lighter pink on the top, and that is stunning. But they don't have any pictures. I've tried it before, but I didn't take any photographs. Sadly, it was back in the time when I was just practicing, and I actually wish now that I had taken some photos. I'm going to do some larger rosettes. I know it's not going to look as consistent, but I'm running out of icing, and I just want to show you how to do this for the tutorial. So slightly bigger, actually it doesn't look too bad. And then any gaps, I'll show you in a moment, you just fill with little stars, or you could do mini rosettes, but I think you'll agree that is really pretty, and particularly for a girl. I'm not being sexist, but particularly for a girl's cake, just really stunning. I'm going to do a couple more. Again, this is quite a rough design, but there you go. Okay, that looks so pretty. And then I'm going to try and put this on top. It's definitely easier if you have a different angle. I'm trying to do it from this angle, which is so tricky. But you know what? It still looks pretty.